ballroom went silent when the billionaire suddenly pointed across the room at the woman everyone else had spent years ignoring. "I need a wife." His voice was calm, almost cold. Then he looked directly at her. "Marry me." The woman nearly dropped the glass in her hand. For several seconds, nobody moved. She was wearing a simple black uniform, standing beside a table covered with expensive champagne. Around her, women in designer gowns stared in disbelief. Some looked offended. Others looked amused. But every one of them was wondering the same thing. Why would a man like him choose a maid? His name was Adrian Blackwood. At 39, Adrian was one of the most powerful businessmen in the city. His hotels stood on 5 continents. His investments were worth billions. Newspapers called him ruthless. Business magazines called him brilliant. And everyone who knew him personally called him impossible to love. He had never married. He rarely dated. He trusted almost no one. And tonight, something had clearly gone very wrong. The woman he had just approached was Elena Hart. She was 31 years old, had worked in Adrian's mansion for nearly 2 years, and had spent most of that time trying to remain invisible. She knew which doors to open, which rooms to avoid, which guests expected silence, and which employees needed help when the cameras weren't watching. She also knew one important rule: never become emotionally involved with the man who signed your paycheck. So when Adrian walked toward her, Elena immediately lowered her eyes. "Sir?" Adrian stopped in front of her. "I need your help." She assumed he meant something related to the party. Instead, he placed a small envelope on the table. "Inside is enough money to change your life." Elena looked at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "What do you want me to do?" His answer came without hesitation. "Pretend to be my wife." A few people nearby overheard him. Their expressions changed instantly. Elena stared at him. "Excuse me? My grandfather is giving me an ultimatum," Adrian said. "He wants me married before the end of the month. If I refuse, he'll change the ownership structure of the family company. So you need someone to play the role." "Yes. And you chose me. I trust you." That answer unsettled her more than the money. Elena slowly pushed the envelope back toward him. "No." Adrian's expression hardened. "No? I can't do that. You haven't even heard how much I'm offering." "I heard enough." For the first time that evening, the billionaire looked genuinely confused. "Everyone has a price, Elena." She finally looked him directly in the eyes. "Maybe everyone you've met does." She pushed the envelope back into his hand. "But I'm not for sale." The room seemed to become even quieter. Adrian stared at her, as if she had spoken a language he had never heard before. Then Elena turned away and returned to her work. She thought the conversation was over. It wasn't, because the next morning, Adrian discovered something that made her refusal impossible to forget. Elena had been quietly paying someone else's medical bills for months. She had almost no money left for herself, and yet she had still refused his offer. Adrian began asking questions. Who was she really? Why was she willing to struggle rather than accept his money? And most importantly, why did the woman who had nothing seem to possess something he had spent his entire life trying to buy? For the first time in years, Adrian Blackwood became obsessed with understanding someone, and he had no idea that the answer would change his entire life. The next morning, Adrian couldn't stop thinking about one sentence. "I'm not for sale." He had heard people refuse him before, but never like that. Usually, when someone rejected Adrian Blackwood, there was anger behind it, pride, a negotiation, a higher price. Elena had offered him none of those things. She had simply walked away. And somehow, that bothered him more than rejection ever had. At breakfast, Adrian watched her move quietly through the dining room. She placed his coffee beside him. "Anything else, sir?" Adrian looked up. "How long have you worked here?" Almost 2 years. And you've never asked me for anything. Elena paused. No. Why? She gave him a puzzled look. Because you're my employer. Then she walked away. Adrian stared after her. That answer should have been ordinary. Instead, it stayed in his mind all morning. Later that afternoon, Adrian returned home unexpectedly. As he entered through the side hallway, he heard Elena speaking softly on the phone. No, Matteo. You need to stay at the hospital. A pause. I'll find a way. Another pause. I promise. Adrian, stop. Matteo. The name sounded familiar. He had heard one of the household staff mention it before. Elena's younger brother. Adrian continued toward his office, but something made him stop. Through the partially open door, he saw Elena sitting alone at the kitchen table. In front of her was a stack of unpaid medical documents. She rubbed her forehead and closed her eyes. For the first time, Adrian saw how exhausted she really was. Not the quiet maid who moved through his mansion without complaint. Not the woman who had refused his money. Just Elena. A woman who looked like she had been carrying the weight of the world alone. Adrian quietly asked his assistant to investigate. He expected something complicated. Instead, he discovered a story that made him uncomfortable. Elena's father had died several years earlier. The family had been left with debt. Her brother Matteo had developed a serious heart condition and needed expensive treatment. Elena had taken the live-in job at Adrian's mansion because it paid more than anything else she could find. Almost every dollar she earned went toward Matteo's care. She barely bought anything for herself. She had even been skipping meals. Adrian read the report twice. Then he closed the folder. Call the hospital. His assistant hesitated. Sir? Find out what Matteo needs. And what should I tell them? Nothing about me. That evening, Adrian paid the outstanding hospital balance through an anonymous donation. He thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, Elena discovered the payment, and she knew exactly who had made it. She stormed into Adrian's office. You paid Matteo's bill. Adrian looked up from his desk. Yes. I told you I didn't want your money. This wasn't part of the marriage proposal. That doesn't make it better. Adrian stood. You needed help. I needed a solution I could earn myself. You couldn't afford to wait. Elena's eyes filled with frustration. You don't understand. Then explain it. She looked at him for several seconds. I don't want to owe you. Those words struck him harder than she expected. Adrian lowered his voice. You don't owe me anything. You're a billionaire. Nothing is ever free. He almost smiled. Almost. You're right. Elena turned toward the door. But this time, it is. She stopped. Adrian continued. I didn't do it because I expect you to marry me. She slowly turned around. Then why? For the first time, Adrian didn't have an answer prepared. Because the truth was becoming uncomfortable. He had spent years believing that people were transactions. Employees worked for salaries. Partners wanted contracts. Friends wanted connections. Women wanted his lifestyle. But Elena had wanted nothing, and that made him want to help her. I don't know, he finally admitted. Elena stared at him. Neither spoke. Then Adrian said something even more unexpected. My mother once needed help. Elena's expression softened. I didn't help her. He looked down. She died believing I cared more about my company than my family. It was the first time Elena had ever seen pain behind his cold expression. Adrian walked back toward his desk. Maybe I don't know how to help people anymore. Elena remained silent. For the first time, she didn't see a billionaire. She saw a wounded man. And Adrian realized something equally dangerous. He no longer wanted Elena to pretend to be his wife. He wanted her near him. But before either of them could understand what that meant, Adrian's grandfather delivered a final ultimatum. The family gala was only 4 days away. If Adrian arrived alone, He would lose control of a company worth billions. And this time, Adrian had only one person he trusted enough to ask: Elena. But asking her again meant risking the one thing he had just begun to value: her trust. 4 days later, Elena stood in front of the mansion mirror, staring at a woman she barely recognized. The dress Adrian's sister had chosen for her was elegant, but Elena still felt uncomfortable. She wasn't afraid of the dress. She was afraid of the people waiting downstairs. "They're going to know," Elena whispered. Adrian, standing near the doorway, looked at her through the mirror. "Know what?" "That I don't belong there." He stepped closer. "You belong wherever you choose to stand." Elena turned toward him. "That sounds easy when you're worth billions." Adrian didn't argue. Instead, he held out his hand. "Then stand beside me." She hesitated. Finally, she placed her hand in his. The moment they entered the gala, hundreds of eyes turned toward them. Whispers spread through the ballroom. "Who is she? Isn't she one of his employees? I heard she works in the house." "There's no way he's serious." Elena tried to ignore them. Then a woman stepped directly into their path. She was beautiful, perfectly dressed, and clearly comfortable among the wealthy guests. "Adrian." His expression immediately changed. "Victoria." Elena noticed the tension between them. Victoria looked Elena up and down. Then she smiled. "So this is the solution?" Elena frowned. "What solution?" Victoria laughed softly. "Don't worry. I'm sure Adrian pays very well." The words landed like a slap. Several guests nearby laughed. Elena's face burned. She released Adrian's hand. "I think I should leave." But Adrian caught her wrist gently. "No." "Adrian, you're staying." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You're really going through with this?" Adrian looked at her. "You seem unusually concerned about my personal life." Victoria's smile disappeared. "You know what your grandfather thinks. I don't care. You should." Adrian stepped closer to Elena. Then, in front of everyone, he said quietly, "I didn't bring her here because she's convenient." The ballroom gradually fell silent. "I brought her because she's the only person I trust." Elena looked at him. Adrian continued, "She refused my money." A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. "She refused my offer." He looked around the room. "And she refused to pretend that wealth makes someone more important than everyone else." Victoria's expression hardened. Adrian turned back toward Elena. "She has more integrity than most people standing in this room." Nobody laughed anymore. Elena didn't know what to say. She had expected Adrian to protect his reputation. Instead, he had risked it to protect hers. For the rest of the evening, something changed. People who had ignored Elena began approaching her. Some wanted to meet her. Others wanted to understand why Adrian had chosen her. But Elena noticed something else. Adrian kept looking at her. Not like an employer watching an employee. Not like a man protecting an arrangement. Like someone trying to memorize every expression on her face. Later that night, Elena stepped onto the balcony to escape the noise. Adrian followed. "You didn't have to defend me like that," she said. "Yes, I did." "Why?" He looked out over the city. "I don't know." She smiled faintly. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Adrian said, "When I first asked you to marry me, I thought I needed someone who wouldn't betray me." Elena looked at him. "And now?" He turned toward her. "Now I'm starting to think I was looking for someone who could make me trust people again." Her expression softened. "That sounds dangerous." "It is." A quiet laugh escaped her. For the first time, Adrian smiled. It wasn't the cold public smile she had seen before. It was real, and Elena suddenly realized something that frightened her. She was beginning to care about him. Not because he was powerful, not because he had helped her brother, Not because he could give her a life she had never imagined. She cared because beneath all that wealth was a lonely man who had forgotten how to let anyone close. And Adrian was beginning to realize something even more dangerous. The arrangement had been supposed to last one evening, but he no longer wanted Elena to leave when the night ended. Then the ballroom doors opened. A messenger hurried toward Adrian. "Sir, your grandfather wants to see you immediately." Adrian's smile vanished. "What happened?" The messenger lowered his voice. "He knows the marriage is fake." Elena's heart dropped. But that wasn't the worst part. The messenger handed Adrian an envelope. Inside was a photograph. Adrian looked at it. His face went completely pale. Elena stepped closer. "What is it?" Adrian folded the photograph before she could see it. Then he whispered, "My grandfather knows something about your family." Elena froze. "My family?" Adrian looked at her, and for the first time that night, he wasn't afraid of losing his inheritance. He was afraid of losing her. Adrian stared at the photograph in his hand, as if it had just destroyed the ground beneath his feet. Elena watched his face change. "What is it?" He said nothing. "Adrian." He finally looked at her. "I need you to trust me." Her expression tightened. "That isn't an answer." Before he could explain, his grandfather appeared at the balcony entrance. "Bring her to my study." Elena immediately sensed that something was wrong. Inside the study, Adrian's grandfather placed an old photograph on the desk. It showed a young woman standing beside a man Elena recognized instantly. Her father. Elena's breath caught. "Where did you get that?" The old man didn't answer. Instead, he said quietly, "Your father worked for this family 20 years ago." Elena stared at him. "My father never told me that." "He couldn't." "Why?" Adrian stepped forward. "Grandfather, what happened?" The old man looked at him. "Your father discovered something he wasn't supposed to know." Elena's hands began to tremble. "What?" A long silence followed. Then Adrian's grandfather revealed the truth. Years ago, money had been secretly diverted from one of the family's companies. Elena's father had discovered the fraud and tried to expose it. But before he could do so, he was blamed for the theft. His reputation was destroyed. He lost his job, and the family had allowed everyone to believe he was guilty. Elena felt as if the room had stopped breathing. "My father wasn't a thief." "No." Tears filled her eyes. "Then why didn't anyone tell us?" "Because the person responsible was protected by someone inside this family." Elena looked at Adrian. He looked just as shocked. "Who?" The old man didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Adrian. "You need to understand something. Your father was not the only person who suffered because of that secret." Adrian's face hardened. Who was responsible? Before his grandfather could answer, the study door opened. Victoria stood there, and behind her was Adrian's uncle. Elena immediately understood. Victoria looked at her with a cold smile. "You should leave." Elena stared at her. "Why?" "Because you were never supposed to be here." Adrian stepped between them. "Enough." Victoria's voice became sharper. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly." "No, you don't." She looked at Elena. "She came into this family because she knew exactly who you were." Elena's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" Victoria turned to Adrian. "Ask her why she accepted your proposal." Adrian looked at Elena. For the first time, doubt entered his eyes. Elena saw it. And something inside her broke. "You believe her?" "I don't know what to believe." The words were quiet, but they hurt more than shouting would have. Elena stepped backward. "I never wanted your money." Adrian said nothing. "I never asked you to pay Matteo's bills." Still nothing. "I never even wanted to come to this gala." Her voice trembled. "You asked me." Adrian finally reached for her. "Elena." She stepped away. "You said you trusted me." "I do." Then why did you look at me like that? Adrian had no answer. Elena wiped her tears. I thought you were different. Then she walked out. Adrian stood frozen. For the first time, he understood what his grandfather had warned him about. Money could buy lawyers. It could buy silence. It could buy loyalty. But it couldn't buy back someone's trust once you destroyed it. That night, Elena packed her small suitcase. She left the mansion before sunrise. Adrian found her note on the kitchen table. There were only a few words. I came here because you asked me to pretend to be your wife. I stayed because I believed you trusted me. I am leaving because I don't know if you ever did. Adrian read the note again. Then again. His chest tightened. He could have stopped her. He could have sent security after her. He could have offered her money. But for once, Adrian understood that none of those things would matter. So he did something he had never done before. He followed the truth instead. He confronted his uncle. He demanded every financial record from 20 years earlier. And by the end of the day, Adrian discovered the person responsible for destroying Elena's family. It wasn't Elena's father. It wasn't Elena. And it wasn't even the man everyone suspected. It was someone Adrian had trusted his entire life. His own mother had known the truth, and she had remained silent to protect the family name. Adrian sat alone in his office, staring at the evidence. Everything he believed about his family had just collapsed. But one thought mattered more than all the others. Elena had been telling the truth from the beginning. He had doubted the only person who had never lied to him. Adrian stood. For the first time in his life, he didn't care what the truth would cost him. He knew exactly where he had to go. He had lost Elena because he had been afraid to trust her. Now he would have to earn her trust back, even if it cost him everything. Adrian found Elena standing outside the small hospital where her brother was receiving treatment. She saw him before he reached her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elena quietly asked, "Why are you here?" Adrian stopped several feet away. "I found the truth." She looked away. "I don't want to hear another explanation." "You deserve to." She shook her head. "You already chose not to trust me." "I know." There was no excuse in his voice, no anger, no arrogance, just regret. Adrian handed her a folder. Inside were documents proving that her father had never stolen anything from the Blackwood family. The evidence also showed that Adrian's mother had known the truth for years and had protected the person responsible. Elena read the documents with trembling hands. Tears slowly filled her eyes. "My father was innocent." "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know." She looked at him. "And when you suspected me?" Adrian swallowed. "I was wrong." That simple admission seemed to hurt him more than any accusation could have. "I spent my entire life believing trust was weakness," he continued. "I thought if I controlled everything, nobody could hurt me." He looked directly at her. "But when I finally found someone I trusted, I became afraid of losing her." Elena's eyes softened. "You did lose me. I know. And you can't fix that with money. I know that too." Adrian reached into his pocket and removed a small key. He placed it in her hand. "What is this?" "The key to my office." She frowned. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I don't want you to depend on me." He took a breath. "I want you to have access to everything. The accounts, the contracts, the foundation, everything." Elena stared at him. "That doesn't make sense." "It does to me," he continued quietly. "If we're ever going to have a future, I don't want there to be secrets between us." She looked down at the key. For the first time, Adrian wasn't trying to control the situation. He wasn't offering money. He wasn't demanding forgiveness. He was giving her a choice. And that was exactly what she needed. Weeks passed. Adrian kept his promise. He exposed the financial crime that had destroyed Elena's family. even though doing so damaged his mother's reputation and caused a major scandal inside the Blackwood family. He publicly cleared Elena's father's name. He created a scholarship in his honor, and he refused to hide behind his wealth. For the first time, people saw Adrian Blackwood admit that his family had done something wrong. But Elena noticed an even bigger change. He began treating people differently. He learned the names of the mansion employees. He stopped humiliating workers when they made mistakes. He started visiting the hospital without photographers. And when Matteo finally walked out of the hospital after his treatment, Adrian wasn't waiting with cameras. He was standing quietly beside Elena. Matteo smiled. "So you're the billionaire everyone keeps talking about?" Adrian laughed. Unfortunately, Elena laughed too. It was the first time they had laughed together, without fear hanging between them. Months later, Elena returned to the mansion. Not as a maid, not as Adrian's fake wife. She had accepted a position managing the charitable foundation Adrian created. She insisted on earning her own salary. He agreed. Their relationship wasn't perfect. They still argued. Elena sometimes worried that Adrian would return to the cold man he used to be. Adrian sometimes feared that one day Elena would realize she deserved someone better, but they kept choosing each other. 1 year after the night he first asked her to pretend to be his wife, Adrian brought Elena back to the same ballroom. The room was filled with familiar faces. This time, nobody whispered. Nobody laughed. Everyone knew who she was. Adrian walked toward her. Elena smiled. "You look nervous." "I am." "Why?" "Because the first time I asked you something in this room, I was afraid of losing my company." He took her hand. "This time, I'm afraid of losing something far more important." Elena's eyes filled with tears. Adrian dropped to one knee. The entire ballroom went silent. He opened a small ring box. "I once asked you to become my wife, because I needed someone beside me." He paused. "Today, I'm asking because I can't imagine my life without you." Elena covered her mouth. "No contract. No family pressure. No money. No pretending." His voice trembled. "Just me asking you to choose me." Elena looked at the man standing before her. The billionaire who once believed everything had a price. The lonely man who had slowly learned how to trust. The man who had finally understood that love couldn't be purchased. She smiled through her tears. Yes, Adrian stood. She took his hand. And this time, nobody saw a billionaire and a former maid. They saw two people who had started on opposite sides of the world and somehow found each other in the middle. Elena never needed Adrian's money to become valuable. Adrian never needed Elena to save his fortune. They needed each other to become better versions of themselves. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of their story. Sometimes love doesn't begin when someone gives you everything. Sometimes it begins when two people stop asking what they can get from each other, and finally ask what they can give. The fake marriage had started as a desperate bargain, but in the end, it became something neither money nor power could create. A real choice, a real family, and a love neither of them had ever expected to find.